Good day, everybody. Welcome to the Live with Kevin. You can see over my shoulder, we're going to be talking about the virtual LeaderCon for a little bit today, but that's not where we're going to start. We're going to start by encouraging you to engage with us for this conversation because this will be way more interesting for my guest and I if you engage with us. But that's not the main reason I want you to do it. The main reason I want you to do it is so that you can imagine you were joining us. And if we weren't virtual and we were all together and you were joining us and you had a question, you'd ask it. If you had a comment, you would share it. If you had an idea, you would offer it, right? Naturally, you would do that. So why not do that here? So you can start by saying hello, telling us where you're from, whatever social platform you're watching on. If you do that, that'd be a great place to start. And then that will hopefully loosen up your fingers and make you feel comfortable to go ahead and share whatever you have to share. And we'll try to get to it. It'll make for a better conversation. It'll help you get more from it. And as I said, JJ and I will have more fun too, which is the tertiary reason, but reason nonetheless. So today I got to thinking about this conversation, and so words like generative AI and hybrid work, leadership are words that we get used all the time. And a few years ago, a couple of those words weren't used at all, but now they all get thrown around all of the time. And I'm happy to introduce welcome my guest, Projal Gatek, to help us talk about that stuff all hooked together. So we've just had a chat for about 5 minutes before I went live, and I know we're going to have a great conversation. We've been trying to connect for some period of time. We wanted to have him on our virtual LeaderCon event, but at the time that wasn't going to work out in his schedule. Now it would have, but then the slots were full. And I said, listen, let's still get together and have a conversation. And so that's what we're going to do. Let me just say one thing about Virtual LeaderCon. It is a 2.5 day event. We would have had him on Tuesday with us when we're going to focus mostly on the future of work, and hybrid work, and that sort of thing. But it's 2.5 days long. It's on a virtual platform, not where we are today, one that creates tremendous amount of interaction and creates conversations between me and my guests. I'll have about almost 20 world-class, world thought leaders joining us to talk about a whole manner of topics for leaders, both personally and professionally. And what I didn't mention is that it's free. So if you go to virtualleadercon.com, I'll put that on the screen in a minute. Virtualleadercon.com is a great place for you to go in order to take advantage of those opportunities, like where we would have had Projal if the world had been a little different at the time. So let me bring him up. There he is. Projal, thanks for being here so much. Let me introduce him a little bit. I'll say a couple things and you can add some color to it, and then we'll dive in. Projal Gatek founded On Loop with the mission of converting every manager in the world into a good manager. That's a pretty good goal. It's not unlike the one I've had for 30 some years. And they've been using generative AI native tech since 2021, when most of us didn't know that it existed, to create their proprietary collaborative team development approach and platform. And it's being used around the world. Before that, he worked at Uber and Accenture Strategy. He got his MBA at Stanford. He's a proud Singaporean who went to the Singapore Management University as a scholar there and is a World Economic Forum technology pioneer, which is really impressive, even though I don't know what it means. Projal, thanks so much for being here. Like I said, we've been trying to put this together for a while, and I'm glad you're here so we can just sort of chat about the future of work, how that all fits together, and like our mutual goal of helping every manager or leader be more effective.
No, thank you. Thank you for having me, Kevin.
So talk about On Loop. Here's what I know. Well, I know a little bit, but one of the things I know is that you founded it during the pandemic. So I think it's one of those stories worth telling. Tell us a little bit about how you came to form it, but also sort of what it is and how it's helping you reach that goal of having every manager be a better manager.
No, thank you. And frankly, some people would think that we timed it, but we didn't. I left Uber late 2019, before the pandemic, and On Loop was born from personal pain. I had the privilege of running regional and global teams at Uber across our operations group and our business development group. And I was constantly frustrated that I didn't seem to have the right tools and the right approaches to really bring the best out of my team. And we saw sort of project management tools and communication tools really sort of take over the workplace. But when it came to doing goals or came to feedback or ongoing development, it felt like we were giving these clunky tools that everybody hated. They were processes that everybody ran away from.
But that's what we're supposed to do. So we kept doing them, right?
Correct, right? And actually, you bring up Stanford, and my 2 years at Stanford, all we spoke about was feedback, and just how critical feedback was for developing self-awareness, for developing people, and my experience in the workplace was short of what I thought was important. And so that's the pain with which OnLoop was born. I went full time working on the company in April of 2020, about a week or two before the world shut down, and obviously, sort of all hell broke loose, and people had to figure out how they now get productive without seeing people in the workplace. Obviously, it led to the Zoom revolution, and everything moving to video calls. But what that really did was also massively reduce the visibility that we had on what was going on. And there are good articles written on the state of managers in the world as a cause of the pandemic. Manager burnout has been at all-time high. I think people's frustrations that they're not sure whether the teams are productive has led to sort of anxiety, both for managers as well as employees. And really, what we're trying to fix is this visibility gap into what's going on in teams, and how we can use a combination of what I call intentional management and sort of the power of applied AI to sort of take people's everyday conversations, everyday interactions, and really extract an understanding of whether people are motivated, what they're working on, where they're stuck, pieces of feedback, ongoing development. So really sort of bringing out structure from sort of unstructured interactions and observations in the workplace.
We'll get to the AI part probably, but I really want to, there's some other things that you've just hinted at, which were some of the things I was hoping we could chat about. So just to unpack them sort of one at a time,
Sure.
you talked about this point that, there's a lot of leaders, managers that are burnout, that their energy level is not very high. And it's not just leaders, by the way, it's also their teams. So from your perspective, both in leading a team and doing this work virtually, but also working with your clients, why has doing work at a distance, that'd be our language, right? Rather than we can put that all under the umbrella of hybrid and remote and all that other stuff, but doing it when we're not always all together.
Yeah.
Why has that exacerbated the internal energy crisis, if you will?
That's a great question. And actually, one of the myths about burnout is that burnout is about working hard. Burnout has nothing to do with working hard. And in the right conditions, you can work really hard for long amounts of time and stay energized. What burnout is a special condition where you think you're running really hard, but not feeling a sense of progress. So you feel stuck, and you feel like you're in this constant cycle of sort of overexerting and getting nothing back.
It's like the vision that I have in my head of that is of a vehicle, either in the snow or in the mud.
Right. Yes.
Spinning. Nothing's happening. We're not going anywhere. We're expending energy,
Totally.
but we're not going anywhere. And that's that sense that you're talking about.
Exactly. And if you go back to infancy, and then, I'm a proud father of a 6-month-old. And actually, I think if you go back to human behavior, it gets formed very, very early. And the way humans sort of get energized is through feedback loops and sort of seeing people's reactions and feeling a sense of progress. And when you're in together doing anything, there's a sense of collective progress that gets felt. And what hybrid work does is that it takes away that sense of collective progress. And
so leading a hybrid team myself, right? I could say that doesn't have to be true, and I think you would agree with me. It doesn't have to be true, but it often is. Now we could all go back pre-pandemic and say we all probably experienced, we were on a team where even when we were all together, we had those same feelings, those same experiences. But why do you think that sense of progress is harder to create, or harder to create when we're hybrid?
Yeah, because at work, the tools are designed to make you do work. They're not designed to help you understand how things are going. And and which is why we had to come up with our framework, and to really rethink sort of even how goals are tracked in organizations. And actually, OKRs as a goal framework has really hurt productivity at an individual and team level. They've been good at helping organizations set a North Star of where they're going. But as a structural framework, they traveled really badly through organizations. And so we define goals as targets, projects, or skills, because those are the three building blocks of what's going on. And every individual can really articulate, what metrics they're trying to hit, what projects they're trying to work on, or what skills they're growing in. And then when you're able to see how that work cascades up or ladders up through the organization, we have a customer in the US. It's an insurtech company called Seek Now. And the problem statement they came us with is that, look, our people are saying they don't understand how their work really connects
So there's
to
how do
the
you get
greater
alignment
goal of
if I don't have a line of sight between what I'm doing on up through, right? And if we don't have
correct,
that,
correct,
it's difficult, highly
correct.
difficult.
And when you see that, you feel like your work is impactful. You feel a sense of progress. You feel energized, and that prevents burnout. And so when people don't see the impact and they don't see the value, that point can be highly demotivating. And that's why goals and how they align and how they cascade has such a strong correlation to doing that right and preventing burnout in organizations. And people don't always necessarily make that link.
We're talking about, and I know you talk about this a lot as well. I mean, we haven't used this word yet, but what we're really talking about is clarity, like
Yes.
being clear about the what and the why, and not just the how of the work, right? So let's talk about uh, how we can start to overcome the clarity dilemma. In fact, quite
Mm.
honestly, like I said earlier, I'm gonna back up. So I said earlier that we've been trying to put this together because you were on my colleague Wayne and co-author Wayne Tramel's podcast, and he said he's awesome and you ought to have him, and so that's what led to all of us making this happen eventually. And one of the things that I think that we are of kindred mind is the power of clarity,
Yep.
and that when we get clear,
Mm.
everything gets easier. So talk about what are some of the things we can do, especially if our team is hybrid,
Yeah.
and we're a leader at whatever level, front line, midline, doesn't matter.
Yeah.
What can we be doing to actively create more clarity? And what are the things we need to be creating clarity on?
Yeah. So we actually call our AI engine Clarity AI. And ultimately, thank you for bringing it up. Like, we feel our job is to create that clarity from sort of unstructured input and ongoing operations at a company. And we break that down into 5 building blocks because we believe that human productivity boils down to 5 hierarchical things. At the base level, are you energized or motivated? And we see it as a battery check. So how full is your battery? Is your battery at 100% or at 0%? And your battery can be full or empty for a variety of reasons. But having clarity of that at a base layer is the most important thing for a manager to understand. And if that is broken below a certain baseline, nothing else matters. The second layer is goals. And some people call it expectation setting, they call it alignment, they call it different things. But it really is, do I understand as an individual what I'm trying to get here? And what does success look like? And what does good look like? And where I might be blocked. And those two layers, so energy and goals, we call the two base performance layers. And I tell every manager that if you have a poor performer, don't give the person constructive feedback. It's not going to do anything. Constructive feedback is something that benefits high performers. If you have a low performer, really understand where the person is on their motivation, and do they have clarity on what they're doing, and that will unlock things. The next three building blocks are around sustaining performance. And so the first being celebrate feedback. To not just recognize people, people understand the value of recognition or praise, but it's really to help people identify what their superpowers are. Because people are most productive when they are clear on what needs to be done. And then they know what skill sets or superpowers they possess in order to achieve those objectives. And then the last two layers are about continuous growth. So, constructive feedback to help people understand blind spots. And that becomes relevant only if the bottom three layers are in a good place. And finally, the top layer is about continuous learning and growth based on your individual set of goals and feedback. And every manager's job is really to drive clarity along those five layers. If you have a high performer, you're typically dealing with stuff towards the top of that pyramid. So you're dealing with ensuring the person knows how to get better. And if a lower performer, you're dealing with things more towards the bottom of that pyramid. And if we can do that through a combination of human and I think we will achieve this outcome of converting every manager into a good manager.
So, you and I were chatting before I hit the Let's Go Live button, and we were talking about how um, AI has the chance to really change in fundamental ways the way work gets done,
Yes,
and obviously that's not a brand new idea, and yet I think that what you have created and what we're talking about here gives us a tangible example, because it's really easy for everyone to nod their head to that point and
yeah,
yet say I don't really know. Like, all I've done with Chat GPT is write a poem or something. Like, I don't know. So my point is, not that you can do that, go for it, right? But
yeah,
my
totally.
point is, you're talking about something that, like, in doing the work, and I'm confident, like in our organization, we're using it for all sorts of things,
Yeah,
and not writing poems necessarily, but I think where you're headed is, how do we integrate it with the work? And you said that your tool is called Clarity AI, which means that you're basically training. Now I'm getting into the weeds a little. You're training the model and to do some very specific things. It's not the out of the box thing we see on the web. So
yeah,
so how are, not technologically, but like, how is AI helping? How are your AI tools helping people solve this clarity crisis?
totally. So, you know, as human beings, we are inherently set up to have conversations, right? That's how we learn, that's how we communicate, and reading and writing and other forms of communication and collaboration are actually more advanced forms. But what happens in organizations today is that people are having conversations, and then a ton of people are spending time structuring those conversations into various reports and various outcomes and various presentations and forms. And actually, I would say 50% of probably organizational effort is based on how do I structure the unstructured into output. And that's where AI is beautiful, in letting humans focus on having those unstructured conversations. And then, based on the use case, whether it's for a structured one on one, whether it's for a probation review, whether it's for a board update on goals, whether it is a performance discussion, the output then can get tailored to specific use cases, taking the same inputs. So rather than a bunch of knowledge workers really spending time on creating those outputs, we can shift all of the human effort to the inputs and the brainstorming and doing the work and collaborating and communicating, and then using technology to create those outputs. And that is a huge time saving for a lot of knowledge workers. It increases the crispness and clarity based on the outcome type. And, all of us are thrown into knowledge work. Not all of us are authors or really taught how to write incredibly well and don't necessarily have that skill set, especially in global organizations where not everybody might have English as their first language, and you have different people at different level. And now you can give written eloquent superpowers to everybody. And we can really reward quality of thought, quality of insight, quality of ideation versus quality of output or report writing. And what I often say is that in organizations we have eloquence bias. So whoever sounds good or looks good is considered smart, considered impactful, where often it's the opposite. It's the quiet person who's doing the work that is actually driving the org forward the most versus sort of who's eloquently outputting it. And today, with applied AI and with sort of inventions in voice AI and video AI, we can start giving everybody eloquent superpowers. And that really allows us to sort of uplift where work is getting done versus where the politics are best played.
So, one of the things that we're going to talk about giving feedback to help people to continue to improve, or
Yeah.
and it may not be, at the lower areas, the foundational areas of your model. You said we're not talking about giving corrective feedback at that point, or criticism at that point, and yet we're trying to get people need to know where they are. We talked about goals or expectations. People know where they are against that expectation. So
Yeah.
wherever we are in however we want to frame that, how can we be using custom AI tools
Yes.
to help us make that feedback more impactful, more helpful, more ultimately better applied?
Totally. So what we say is that humans are not good at feedback. They're good at observations, right? So say you showed up in a meeting, right? I have certain observations how Kevin showed up. Like, look, he was a little bit untidy, he was a little bit late,
Hey,
but but he had, like, it was clear that he had researched a lot on the people, so he got through the content right, but the energy was a little bit low, and overall it was okay, right? That's actually not feedback. That's an observation. And so what we now do with our AI is we take that observation, we go and identify specific pieces of celebrate feedback and specific piece of improve feedback, and then rewrite that following a situation behavior impact model of how to write good feedback. So you can say, look, it was clear that Kevin was very well prepared for the meeting, and as a result it was clear that the people in the room were quite impressed, and that increased his credibility, right? Or you can say, however, he could have done a better job in showing up a little bit earlier and sort of taking time to be poised, and as a result that would have further enhanced his credibility in the room. And then you can extract skills or competencies based on an organizational behavioral framework or values or other ways to then identify what are certain hypotheses or superpowers or blind spots for Kevin. And you can do that all from a unstructured sort of mental diary of observations. And that feedback is now a lot more impactful. It's a lot more valuable for Kevin to understand that broken down, understand that delivered where the situation behavior impact is clear and the skills and competencies are clear. And then we can give suggestions on how, with the blind spots, he can then grow, all from a human modeled observation. So the analogy I use is, when I was young and you were young, we memorized phone numbers. I knew all my friends' phone numbers. We called them on a landline, right? And we wrote them down. I don't know anybody's numbers except my wife, so that if I'm in an emergency, I can call. And you have an address book. And we've been able to outsource that to the address book. Is the same thing with things like feedback. We can now outsource that to a system that is a triple PhD in English and is better trained at doing that than we are. But what we have is the insight and we have the observation. And that is important to then feed as an input, to then structure it for the output that is most sort of impactful in its delivery.
So let me get really granular on something.
Yes.
Since we got into the meat of that, which I have
Yes.
to do. I'm curious because so many people, me included, would say if I'm using the standard models, that I'm using it to get me to 80%, right? I'm writing something that's getting me 80%, and I'm still going to look at it. I'm still going to say, yeah, is this really what I want? Are you suggesting, though, then that we're using the tool to create this feedback using in terms of both right words and format? Are you still suggesting then that, hey, we need to put our eyes across it? Is this really what we want? Is this really accurate? Do we want to make any adjustments? Like now we're at 80, 85, 90%. Is that what you would say?
So you always want the human in the loop, right? But when it comes to delivering feedback, I think your 80% might be very different from a first-time manager's 80%. And so if you're a true expert, right, then there might be that additional human input that actually makes it even better. But actually, for a lot of people, just that AI output is probably significantly superior on what they would have come up with on their own. Another example I use is parking cameras in cars. Like I've become a way better parallel parker because of camera aids. Now, I'm sure a Formula One race car driver would parallel park just fine without any aids. But what aids do is they uplift all of us. And the best human will always be probably better, right? Like in the same way that like the best artist or the best carpenter or the best musician, like people who are true experts in anything will always outdo what is machine generated. But machines will help uplift sort of the average to a much higher level.
The base will come up a lot.
Absolutely. Right. And what we're trying to do here is really move the mean up. Not so much, work with the outlier. And just because that a certain human might be better at something doesn't mean that we should reject the AI, because the AI can be better than 90% of the people out there. And I find that actually a lot more impactful and a lot more meaningful versus argue, is there someone who could do it better? Yeah, probably yes. Right. Like you're not going to have AI drive Formula One cars, but they're likely going to replace most taxi drivers in most major cities. And both can then coexist.
Right, exactly. So the other thing that you said, and we need to start thinking about wrapping up here, although I know you and I could talk for a long time. Before we went live, you also said, I'm a technology optimist in general. I'm sure there are people listening or watching who are saying, well, yeah, but JJ, yeah, but Kevin, help us see what you see. I mean, you've just said this a little bit, but help us see what you see that makes you optimistic about these kinds of tools moving forward.
Yeah, look, as humans, I think if you're in a comfortable spot, change is uncomfortable. Right. So, and it's the same thing that happened when computers came out, right? Where people like, now I know how to run things in the old school way, right? Like I don't need these computers to really help me. But the reality is that even people who were, digitally not savvy have now learned how to use computers and cell phones and massively enrich their lives. And this time around, it's not any different. And the reality is that with each technological wave, the technology gets more powerful. And therefore, the sort of size of impact it can make gets even greater. And when that happens, there is sort of automatic resistance. But my advice to people is sort of, as Carol Dweck says, to be in a state of growth mindset versus fixed mindset. And you're always going to encounter people who are in a sort of fixed mindset saying, nope, this is the way it is, and I'm going to fight it. But we've seen this time and time again. But
all those people have given up their landlines.
Eventually.
Not all of them, but it's getting close. Getting closer, right?
And it's really about a growth mindset. and it's really about not just looking at this, but looking at any change in the world with a sense of, okay, how can we use this for good? And how can we use the right guardrails to not use it for bad? And we've seen that with social media, we've seen that with cell phones, we've seen that with screens for children. Like, this is not the first technology that can be used for good or for bad. But I believe that the goods of AI massively outweigh the bads, at least in terms of how it will show up in everybody's lives.
It's a pretty good place to end. But Prajal Gotchak, what else is there anything I didn't ask that I should have, that you wish I would have? So like, I thought Kevin would talk about this and he didn't.
I'm sure we can talk about many things, but I think your audience is a lot of leaders and managers, and that's the audience we're speaking to. And what I push people to do is, in their everyday lives, look to simplify versus complexify. And when you simplify things, you increase clarity. You make things sort of crisper. And so we live in a complex world, and there's a lot that's thrown at us. And so my simple ask of people is to try and simplify things, because that will sort of help see things more clearly.
Yeah, the antidote to complexity is clarity. So, JJ, thank you so much for being here. The company is On Loop. You can go to onloop, just like it sounds, .com. I hope that people will do that. And I hope that people, if you liked what we talked about today, you have a good sense of the kinds of conversations that we'll be having next week at Virtual LeaderCon, although they will be more interactive with the group, the nature of our platform. And we'll be on a variety of topics. And on Tuesday, the 17th, we'll be mostly talking about future of work, hybrid stuff, the kinds of stuff. And this is where, excuse me, that's where JJ would have been slotted in if that had worked. But then all day, we're calling that our pre-conference day. And then on Wednesday and Thursday, the 18th and 19th, we're going to talk about a wide variety of topics with experts that I guarantee, if you're listening to me, you've heard of or read some of their work along the way. So I hope that you'll join us for that, virtualleadercon.com. And I hope you'll go take a look at onloop.com to see the work that JJ and his team are doing. Sir, thank you for being here. It's a pleasure to have you.
No, thank you for having me. This was great. Thank you, Kevin.
All right. Thanks, everybody.